Imagine building the hotel, the Cecil Hotel now. It would be way more than $28 million.
Especially in downtown Los Angeles. Yeah.
I mean, today, yeah, exactly. I started looking into the name Cecil. So I said, okay, Cecil, that's an unusual name. Well, it turns out Cecil, the origin of the word is blind. Unsolved mystery. What do they consider it? Did they mark it as?
It was an accident.
They just said it was an accident. She accidentally opened up a massive grate and she accidentally climbed into the thing and accidentally stripped her clothes off and accidentally drowned to death in there.
So maybe people aren't like dying to be there.
Well, they literally are dying there, but yeah. Literally, I've got a photo. I found a photo of his headstone. Right? On the registration card, it lists an address that was his address, and it was the Biltmore Hotel's address.
That is so weird.
Right.
That is so weird to me.
Two iconic hotels, one that's tied up in the death of Elizabeth Short in the Black Dahlia story, and the other that deals with the modern day story of Elisa Lam. All right, good evening. We're SGND going live from the park again. Got some good conversations. We started going down some rabbit holes, huh?
I know. I did love it though, because it's just like you're starting to get on this true crime road.
Yeah.
And I need somebody to talk to about this stuff.
I can't help it. Like once I start going in on something that I get interested about, then it becomes a little bit of an obsession. It's an obsession. How about that?
I was like so impressed with like how much research that you did.
Yeah.
It's like,
and I feel like I've only barely scratched the surface because some of the stuff was so hard to find anything about. Yeah. So where we left off last time, what started us down this road was really talking about Liam's story, right?
Elisa.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Elisa Lam.
Oh, Lam. That's right. Elisa Lam.
I consider it kind of an unsolved mystery, but people say it was an accident.
Unsolved mystery. What do they consider it? Did they mark it as?
It was an accident.
They just said it was an accident. She accidentally opened up a massive grate and she accidentally climbed into the thing and accidentally stripped her clothes off and accidentally drowned to death in there. We have to watch that Netflix series now too. Now, I had this started all with you talking about the Cecil Hotel. Right.
I'm obsessed with it, but you know a lot more than I do now.
Well, I've learned a lot about the Cecil Hotel because I really didn't understand like the background and history. And once I saw there was like a couple of famous unalivings there, then I started to actually dive into it. And when you dive into it, it's even more bizarre because you get into it and you realize that the whole thing, I guess you can argue that it's difficult to carry records during that time period.
Yes, but no records at all.
Yeah, well, so I was going to get into that. So the construction was like 1920s, right? Early 1920s. And there was also another infamous hotel, the Biltmore. Was it the
Biltmore?
Biltmore. Thank you. Biltmore. B-I-L-T-M-O-R-E.
I think it's Biltmore, yeah.
The Biltmore Hotel. And so like these two have a lot of history together. And the reason they have a lot of history together was a wild thing. So I started off just by wanting to understand, okay, when was the Cecil Hotel built? So I started looking into the Cecil Hotel itself. And real simple from like Wikipedia, I get the Cecil Hotel was built in 1942 or 1924, I'm sorry, by three hotelers, William Banks Hanner, Charles L. Dix, and Robert H. Schnapps. And I'm like, okay, shops, I guess. I'm like, okay, this is interesting because during 1920s, having $2 million in capital or whatever was quite a bit of money. And so then I said, okay, well, were these guys well established? Did they build a bunch more hotels and things like that?
2 million back then wouldn't be 2 million now.
Well, it's the equivalent of 28 million now.
So that's not an insignificant amount of
money.
But
I would bet it would be even more. Like, imagine building the hotel, the Cecil Hotel now. It would be way more than $28 million.
Especially in downtown Los Angeles. Yeah.
I mean, today, yeah, exactly. So it was, not only is the cost of it to develop it, but just that area and cost development. Now, this wasn't a time period, take you back to the 1920s, where it was prosperous to build in California and LA. So that was the big thing. People were buying land there and they were building. There was multiple of these hotels that were built, like the Biltmore that we talked about, was built around the same time period.
Well, and they were all connected somehow.
Yeah, they're all connected in one way or another. It's odd. Well, obviously all the deaths too tie them in. But so some of the first things. So I went on Wikipedia, I looked up these guys. And I said, okay, they invested about 2.5 million in total for the enterprise to get it up and going. Then they were hit by the Great Depression, right? And so it didn't fare as well as they thought. Now, I started looking into the name Cecil. So I said, okay, Cecil, that's an unusual name. Well, it turns out Cecil, the origin of the word is blind.
Which I find super interesting.
Yeah, blind.
I think that means something.
Right. So then I started looking into, I said, okay, what else would be, where would the inspiration to name it the Cecil come from? Well, it turns out that there was a wealthy family over in England with the last name of Cecil. So the assumption, at least from the resources on the internet I've gotten, is that they potentially wanted to name it the Cecil Hotel, kind of to draw the higher class, the aristocrat class. And that's what this hotel was destined for. It was supposed to be that. And again, this was at a time when California was building large buildings like crazy. There was a lot of development going on, and there's a lot of hotels that are still there that were built in this time period. So if you look through, I started looking through all these infamous hotels like the Standard Hotel, the Biltmore Hotel, the Cecil Hotel. A lot of these were constructed during that time period.
Okay.
So the Cecil's still standing, but was sold and then converted into recently homes like community center, like a homeless shelter, basically. And now it's abandoned again.
Which is crazy. That's such a big plot of land in LA to like go.
Well, it isn't Skid Row,
untouched.
right? Kind of the impoverished area right outside of the main part of LA.
Right. So maybe people aren't like dying to be there.
Well, they literally are dying there, but yeah. So then I said to myself, well, let's start off with the first things. I always like to know like the basics, like what was the inspiration by the hotel for the hotel? Why did they build it? Okay. So I look into it, and the first thing I find is that the hotel was also designed by a Lloyd Lester Smith in the Beaux Arts style, Beaux, like Beaux Arts style, popular architectural movement at the time. I get into there and I start looking into Lloyd Lester Smith. And I looked into Lloyd Lester Smith, and his history was a little bit interesting. Although there isn't a ton about him personally, as you'll see with basically everyone who's involved with the development and building of this hotel, you almost can get very little to no information whatsoever.
Which is odd.
I thought so. Like, I thought people who built one of the more iconic hotels in Los Angeles would have a pretty storied history, or at least be able to see what are the things they've done. So I guess my next area I'm going to have to go to is literally going to LA and searching like their archive.
I can't picture you in LA like ever, but especially Skid Row.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I'd have to go in the Skid Row area, but I have to go somewhere where they have physical like microfiche and newspaper clippings and things of that, because you literally cannot find anything about, well, I'll get into that. Let me go back to this designer.
Okay.
So the designer designed numerous buildings, including like the Masonic Lodge, a couple of churches, and then 2 other hotels. So I found that to be interesting. I was like, okay, immediately associated.
So they just had a ton of hotels, or they were just associated with the hotels?
No, I'm talking about the designer who designed the layout for the Cecil Hotel. Outside of that, when you try and find out like who he was married to, what he did in his life, all that kind of stuff, there's no mention.
That's so weird.
Or like, and then they mentioned a couple other projects. And again, the ones I found to be the most interesting were the Masonic Lodge and the 2 churches.
Right.
And then also like one city building, I think it was the courthouse, maybe he did as well. So he did like the courthouse, the design for the courthouse, a Masonic Lodge, the Cecil Hotel, one other hotel, and then one other building that was like, not the banks, it was like another financial institution building.
Okay.
Like an investor's building. And so I said, okay, great. Well, let me go back to the owners, the developers. With the internet, you can literally find almost nothing about the owners. So I looked into William Banks Hanner. William Banks Hanner has probably the most out of the other 2. But William Banks, literally I've got a photo. I found a photo of his headstone, right? Confirming his birth dates and when he passed. Okay. So I found that. I found that also personal life that talks about, this is also from ChatGPT. So I did ChatGPT and internet searches, and basically they're spitting out the exact same thing, where it's almost like word for word, just the same 3 paragraphs. So When he was born, December 31st of 1889 in Greensboro, Guilford, North Carolina, United States, his father, Samuel Alfred Hanner, was 26 and his mother, Mary Ellen Wagner, was 20. I find that interesting. I don't know if they're denoting that they weren't married,
And it was like maybe more
especially
scandalous back
during
then.
1889.
Yeah.
That sounds interesting to me.
Okay, yeah.
But so there's no further mention that I could find of his parents whatsoever.
That is so crazy to
So
me.
then he immigrated to San Diego, California, United States in 1928. So the guy's like basically 30 years old and moves out to California.
Okay.
1928. That's when he moved out there. This building was built in 1924. So
So,
before he moved out there, he invested the money got involved with two other partners, raised over $2.5 million in capital, and built this hotel, which they said the planning for it started in 1920. So you figure the guy was just about 30 years old.
and he has somehow enough money to build the Cecil Hotel.
Yeah.
Or at
along
least,
with these partners. But he was the main investor listed first on there.
I wonder if that means he put in the most capital, or
I would assume so. So then it talks about registered military service in 1919. He died on the 25th of April, 1966, at the age of 76. So a guy
That's
was born
relatively
in
young.
1889, helped build one of the main partners in building the Cecil Hotel. And as far as the internet is concerned, that I can tell right now, he had nothing worth of mention from 1924 till he passed in 1966, and built one of the most infamous hotels in Los Angeles in the United States, where there was action and murders and deaths occurring regularly.
All of the time.
So I was looking up and I found a registration card. So this is a proposed document that was scanned online that says it's his registration card for draft. Okay, it's a draft
so his
registration
draft
card.
for World War
It would have been
II.
after World War II, or just no, it would have been World War II. Yeah, it would have been World War
Okay.
II, 1940, because he was 51 at the time, so it was after. And he listed his age as 51 years old on the card,
Okay.
and his date of birth is 1886 or 1889. So he's got to be in his almost 50, like in his 40s now. Or he's 51 is what he listed on the card. Yeah.
Yeah. Wait, so was there not a cap back then, I guess? Or did he just want to
I don't know. I found this registration card that was a hand filled out scanned copy of a registration card. Okay. On the registration card, it lists an address that was his address, and it was the Biltmore Hotel's address.
That is so weird.
Right.
That is so weird to me.
So it was the Biltmore Hotel as his address. And then it also asked on the form to leave a information of someone who would contact that would know your address. Like in the form, it says, what's your current address? And then it also states like, what's an address and name of a person who will always know where your address is, your current address is.
It's oddly specific.
Yeah, that's how it's listed on this registration form.
So weird.
And on there, he wrote, no, it was the Strawn Hotel, Straun Hotel. That's what it was at 729. That's the other one I was trying to think of.
Okay.
So anyway, there's then the Strawn Hotel, which was demolished in 1972 or something like that. And it was similarly built in 1920s and was built by the Strawn Group, who got together and put together the money to build this hotel. Now, the Strawn Hotel was one that was built, and it was supposedly like a little bit of a lower class, more like a, I don't want to say lower class, well, like a step down. It was a step down in service from the Cecil Hotel.
Was the Cecil Hotel like high end?
Yeah, the Cecil Hotel was supposed to be high end.
That is
so. It was supposed to be like aristocrats. And this would be like more like family vacation.
Okay.
But then that hotel ended up becoming this hot spot. So the depression hits, and the Cecil Hotel in Skid Row brings down the interest in the Cecil Hotel.
Okay.
And it manages to survive, but it loses all its glare. But then that Strawn Hotel actually builds up and becomes the place to be. And then the Strawn Hotel has a whole dark history of murders and suicides and things of that nature. And 729 East Avenue, I believe, or 729 South Union is the location of the Strawn Hotel. That's the hotel that the Elizabeth Short was at. the woman who was famously known as the Black
Black
Dahlia.
Dahlia. That's
And that's the
crazy.
hotel that she left from that she was last seen.
Was at the Strong Hotel.
Strong, yeah. Which is the address that the gentleman, Mr. Hanner, listed as his permanent residence and like basically like an emergency contact, but an individual who would know his location in the future was that same address. So he listed that hotel. Again, I was just looking to find information about the owners to start off there. And it keeps linking back to. So this is the guy that we know the most about. So William Banks Hanner was born in 1889. He passed away in 1966. He went from North Carolina to California. Sometime around 30 years old, he amassed enough capital to build the Cecil Hotel
I was just so
in Skid
young.
Row. Hold on, in Skid Row, Los Angeles. I want to review everything and make sure we're on the same page. In Skid Row, Los Angeles, with 2 other partners.
Mm-hmm.
The other 2 partners currently, I can find no information about them whatsoever on
Even
the internet.
age.
Nothing.
Wow.
No date of birth, no passing, no family members, no marriages, nothing like that.
They're just like names.
Yeah. And same thing with Hanner. No family, no marriages, nothing like that. We have a birth date, a day he passed, that he was a major investor in one of the most infamous hotels in U.S. history, and that's it. And then he passed away in 1966. So that's where I'm at with that. But again, I find it interesting with all the things that occurred at the Cecil Hotel and the unalivings and the events that occurred. I find it interesting that he was also listed in the documents as being associated with the Strawn Hotel, Straun, which was supposed to be the step down, which ended up becoming the big place to be after the Depression because the Cecil Hotel and its location in Skid Row deterred people from coming there. Where the other hotel became a spot where celebrities went, where foreign dignitaries ended up coming and things like that in Los Angeles.
I want to know their connection because you don't just put that as your address on a form.
Yeah,
It's
on
like,
your draft registration form.
draft registration form. Like, there has to be a big link there that we just don't know.
And it was his contact, like listed as his contact of who's the individual. It states on there, who's the individual that will always know your permanent address or your resident address. And he lists the hotel again. He lists it by name.
So I wonder if this is all speculation at this point, but there has to be a strong connection, like friends, family, somebody owned or worked or something at that hotel. Or maybe he lived there. I don't know.
Well, I tried looking into the parents and thought like maybe this guy came from money, right? Coming from North Carolina, maybe his parents owned some big factory or something like that, and he was able to have capital that way. No mention of it.
Okay.
No mention of his parents.
Sounds like no mention of anything, really.
Literally, it's like family background. Similarly, there's little information about his family background, including parents, siblings, or any other relatives.
I mean, he was like a major hotel guy, especially for such an iconic hotel, and we have nothing about that.
Well, cause of death. There's no widely available public record specifying his cause of death. He died at 66.
It's pretty young.
Oh, no, he died at 70. Yeah, 70.
Still pretty young.
Yeah, it's a little bit older. I can see that. Burial, no specific details, but I did find a gravestone.
Okay.
Actually, I don't know where that's at. I do have a photo of it that shows just his birth and date and passing records. So anyway, I find that odd that 2 iconic hotels, one that's tied up in the death of Elizabeth Short and the Black Dahlia story, and the other that deals with the modern day story of Elisa Lam. And
which was a major one.
Numerous other people.
That one shook the nation, I think.
Well, the same thing was with that Strawn Hotel as well. It has a storied history of deaths and suicides and things of that nature.
I want to know if this is a common thing for hotels. Like, do you think hotels...
I don't know. I mean, I guess you can argue that since they've been around since the 1920s, so much has happened. But if you look into the history of it, a lot of it happened earlier on. Like we saw with the Cecil Hotel, most of it had occurred before 1990. And then there was a period where it was quiet.
I know.
And then it kind of started up again. Yeah, and then it started up again. So, but I mean... Yeah, well, and then we looked into the Biltmore Hotel, and the Biltmore Hotel had 2 guys of the same name being murdered 3 months apart. One ended up being a mob boss who was shot in the lobby, which I found to be wild because that actually makes a lot of sense. That I started to wonder if it was just because of the fact that the guy was named similarly, because there was a gentleman earlier who had the same name as the mob boss who was, I gotta be careful. I've been going off with the word script. I haven't been using the words.
It's hard.
Who was forcibly unalived by a metal object in his room, brutally. So then that same year, 3 months later, the mob boss was pew-pewed in the lobby in the same time period. Like 3 months apart. So one was July and one was September.
Of the same year,
The
because
exact same year.
I think
And they had the exact same name.
your theory, I think, makes a lot of sense. That I think they were going after the main guy, the main boss, but they just assumed that since this guy had the same name, it might have been him.
I just wonder if there was just a contract.
Because that's
and
way too much of a coincidence.
in the same hotel, like less than 2 months apart, July to September.
That's odd.
I
All
thought
these
so.
are weird, like odd coincidences, but I feel like there's not that many coincidences in life. Like there's had to be a connection there.
Well, just with how much heat the Cecil got, it made me start to wonder about what else was going on.
I want to know why Cecil. Like we know that it means blind, but like why that name?
Well, again, the speculation that I found was either that it was named after that family, which I'm going to have to look into next, or I assume the thing that makes the most sense is actually being named after that family.
Yeah, but what does the family have going on?
They're a wealthy family from over in England.
So maybe they paid for a lot. Maybe they like funded a lot of it.
Well, that was the next thing. I was wondering if they could have been potentially the funders of the hotel.
And maybe they just put these three up as like
to manage it or something like that. Yeah, to run it on the state side. Welcome to Salted Wares live for shout out. Give like.